It was a Tuesday morning quiet, like most of them are now. I had just poured myself a cup of coffee, nothing fancy, just the store brand kind I buy in bulk, and was settling into my usual spot at the kitchen table when I saw it. The envelope. It was cream-coloured, thick, like something you'd get from a law office or a wedding invitation company, the kind of paper that practically announces it's carrying something important. My name was written across the front in black ink. Mrs. Helen Bradford. Not Mom, not even Mother. Just the formal version, like I was a distant relative you felt obligated to include in a holiday card. I knew the handwriting right away. Lauren's script had always looked like it belonged on fancy wedding place cards, perfect loops, clean lines like she practiced for years, just to make it look effortless. I should have known better the moment I held it in my hand. There was a weight to it, not just the paper, but something else, something heavier. My coffee was still too hot to drink, but I didn't wait. I opened the envelope, expecting maybe a note, a card, something that required this kind of ceremony. Instead, there was just one piece of paper. No greeting, no message, no explanation. Just a printed invoice. The top line read, Wedding Planning and Ceremony Services, $35,000. Below that, another line. 3-week honeymoon in Tuscany, $35,000. Total $70,000. Payment due in 30 days. And at the bottom, in her unmistakable handwriting, she had added a note. You should feel lucky I'm letting you contribute at all. After everything you've put this family through, this is the least you can do. I must have read it 10 times. My eyes took in the words, just fine, but my heart refused to believe them. I sat there in silence, the sounds of the apartment around me suddenly sharp and loud, the hum of the refrigerator, the ticking of the clock on the wall, the creak of the chair under me. My hand still holding the mug started to tremble just slightly, and then the mug slipped. It hit the tile floor and shattered coffee spilling across the white surface like something that couldn't be undone. I didn't move. I didn't gasp. I just stared at it. 27 years of motherhood, and this is what it came down to. Not a phone call, not a visit, not even a conversation, just a bill. A demand, really. Like I was an ATM someone had forgotten about until they needed a withdrawal. I thought about the last time I saw Lauren Christmas dinner a year and a half ago. She showed up late, wore a tight smile, asked how I was, but didn't really listen to the answer. Her fiancé, Matthew, barely spoke to me. When he did, he had this tone like he was humouring me. I left early that night, said I had a headache. She didn't even walk me to the door. Now standing in my quiet little kitchen with shards of ceramic at my feet, and bitter coffee staining the grout, I realized something with awful clarity. I wasn't her mother anymore. I was just the person she remembered to bill. After I cleaned up the broken mug and the mess on the floor, I sat back down at the table and just stared out the window for a while. I couldn't stop thinking about how we got here. How my daughter, the little girl who used to crawl into my bed during thunderstorms and whisper that I was her safe place, had turned into someone who could send her mother an invoice without a second thought. I didn't want to spiral, but the memories kept coming like a reel. I couldn't pause. Lauren wasn't always like this. When she was small, she was the kind of kid who made the world feel a little softer. She'd bring me dandelions from the backyard and insist they were sunflowers, her tiny hands clutching the stems with pride. She'd sit in the library after school while I finished my shift, quietly flipping through picture books or doodling stories of her own. She was warm, curious, thoughtful. She used to kiss my cheek and tell me she loved me this much, her arms stretched as wide as they could go, but something started shifting around the time she turned 15. It was subtle at first, a change in the way she spoke, the way she looked at things. She began using words like image and reputation phrases I'd never heard come out of her mouth before. She stopped inviting Rosa over her best friend since kindergarten. They used to be inseparable, always giggling over inside jokes and sleepover secrets. Then one day, just like that, Rosa was gone from her life. I remember asking about it, and Lauren just shrugged and said, "We're in different places now." No emotion, just a cold, rehearsed sentence, like she was closing a door. I knew Rosa's mum worked as a housekeeper and her dad fixed cars. They weren't fancy, but they were good people. And suddenly, that wasn't enough for Lauren. She started hanging around with girls whose mums drove Range Rovers and wore tennis bracelets to PTA meetings. It was like she had stepped into a different world, and I was no longer part of it. I should have pushed back. I should have said something, challenged her when she made those snide little comments, or dropped people like they were yesterday's fashion. But I didn't. I didn't want to be the nagging mum. I didn't want to drive her away. So I stayed quiet, hoping it was a phase. But the phase never ended. There were scholarships, internships, job offers in the city. She moved to Manhattan, and with every step up that ladder, it felt like she left a piece of herself behind, and one of those pieces was me. Our calls got shorter. Visits only happened on holidays, and even then she looked uncomfortable, like she was doing her time. After Jack died, she came to the hospital once. She stayed 22 minutes, looked at her watch 3 times, brought no flowers, asked no questions. And still I hoped, because that's what being a parent does to you. No matter how much they change, how far they drift, you keep seeing the child who once held your hand and begged you to never let go. I sat at that kitchen table for a long time just thinking. At first, all I felt was numbness. Then came the disbelief, and after that, something colder. Not rage, not sadness, just this sharp, clear sense that something had shifted. I'd spent most of my adult life living by a simple rule: make things easier for other people. Don't raise your voice, don't cause waves, just quietly show up and keep the peace. That's how I got through my marriage, through motherhood, through losing Jack. But this invoice, it cracked something open in me. I wasn't even invited to the wedding yet. Somehow I was expected to help fund the whole thing. And not just expected, told I should feel lucky to be allowed to. I pushed the invoice aside and opened my laptop. I wasn't entirely sure what I was looking for at first, but I started by typing in the name printed at the top of the invoice, Christina Doyle. Turns out she wasn't just some run-of-the-mill planner. Her website looked like a spread in a bridal magazine. Minimalist, glossy, expensive. Packages started at $10,000 and went up from there. Clearly, Lauren wasn't going for simple. Next, I typed in the name of the venue, Riverside Manor, Connecticut, and cross-referenced it with the wedding date. October. I couldn't see Lauren's social media directly anymore, but mutual friends had tagged her in a few posts. Pictures of dress fittings, tastings, little snippets that made it clear this was the real deal. She hadn't mentioned a word of it to me. Not a save the date, not a heads up, just an invoice. Then I looked up the resort listed for the honeymoon Villa Solana in Tuscany. That one really got to me. Infinity pool, private chef, ocean views, over $1,000 a night. And here I was, clipping coupons and eating leftovers 3 days a week. By the time noon rolled around, I had a full picture of the fantasy world Lauren and Matthew had designed, and how casually they had planned to build it on the foundation of my silence. They thought I would just write a check and disappear into the background like I always had, that I'd be too polite or too guilt-ridden to say no. I sat back, stared at the screen, and then reached into the cabinet above the fridge. I pulled out a bottle of wine I'd been saving for Jack's retirement party, a party that never happened. I cracked it open right there in the middle of the day and poured myself a glass. Not to celebrate, just to mark the moment, to acknowledge it. Then I pulled out a notepad, the kind I used to keep for grocery lists, and I started writing down names, contacts, venues, everything I had just learned. This wasn't about revenge. It wasn't even about money. It was about saying enough. If Lauren wanted to pull me into this wedding as a silent benefactor, she had another thing coming. I wasn't going to yell or threaten or beg. I was going to be a problem. The kind that smiles politely while turning over the table. The next afternoon, I got dressed with more intention than I had in years. I pulled out a navy blue dress I'd bought a decade ago for a retirement gala I never ended up attending. It still fit looser now, but that wasn't a bad thing. I added my mother's pearl necklace and a pair of low heels that had been sitting in the back of the closet since Jack's funeral. I wanted to look like a woman who could write a $70,000 check without blinking. Not because I intended to write one, but because appearances buy attention. I'd learned that much from Lauren. Christina Doyle's office was in a modern building overlooking the Hudson River, the kind of place with glass walls, soft music, and candles that probably cost more than my weekly groceries. The elevator opened to a pristine lobby where a receptionist greeted me with that rehearsed kind of smile. Everything smelled faintly like lavender and money. When Christina walked in, I recognized her right away from her website. Tall, well-dressed, warm, in a very curated way. "Mrs. Bradford," she said, offering her hand like we were old friends. "It's such a pleasure. Please come in." She led me into a spotless office with a view of the water. She offered me coffee in an actual china cup, which I accepted, even though I don't usually drink a second cup in the afternoon. I didn't want to look guarded or defensive. Let her think I was exactly what she expected, until I wasn't. "We are absolutely thrilled to be planning your daughter's wedding." Christina began flipping open a leather folder on her desk. "Lauren has exquisite taste. The venue, the floral installations, the dress, it's all going to be breathtaking." "Yes," I said lightly. She always did have a flair for the dramatic. She laughed politely, though I'm not sure she knew if I meant it as a compliment. Then she leaned in slightly. "So, I understand you'll be finalizing payment for several of the outstanding items today I set down my cup. I'm afraid there's been a misunderstanding," I said. She blinked. "Oh, I received an invoice yesterday. It was the first I'd heard of any involvement on my part. I wasn't even invited to the wedding." Christina looked thrown for the first time. "Lauren mentioned you were eager to contribute, that you felt terrible for missing the ceremony and wanted to make it up to her." "No," I said simply. "She sent me a bill for $70,000 and told me I should feel lucky to be allowed to pay. That's not a contribution. That's an ultimatum." Christina shifted in her chair, straightening a paperclip that didn't need straightening. "Well, I apologize. That's highly irregular. All of our vendors require contracts and confirmation. Lauren and her fiancé signed for everything, of course. And I didn't," I said. "So if that money doesn't appear, what happens?" She hesitated. "There may be delays, possibly cancellations. Without payment, some vendors will walk." "I see." I stood up and gathered my bag. "When my daughter calls you, and she will please tell her this, if she wants to discuss money, she can call me directly. Not assume. Not invoice. Call." Christina stood too clearly unsure of what to say. "Mrs. Bradford." "If she doesn't call," I said calmly, "then she doesn't get a wedding." And with that, I walked out of that office feeling taller than I had in years. That night, after getting back from Christina Doyle's office, I pulled out an old address book from the drawer next to the phone. The thing was falling apart, frayed edges, faded ink coffee stains from 100 mornings, but I still kept it. Somehow I knew I'd need it again one day. I flipped through the pages, slowly names I hadn't thought about in years staring back at me. And then I found her. Rosa Bennett. It stopped me cold for a second. I hadn't said that name out loud in, God, maybe a decade. Rosa used to live next door when Lauren was growing up. For years, the two of them were inseparable. They played in the yard together, shared snacks, built forts out of sofa cushions. Rosa's family didn't have much, but they were kind. Her mum worked 2 jobs, cleaning houses mostly, and her dad fixed cars in a little shop he ran himself. Honest people. Lauren loved Rosa back then, but that changed around high school. I still remember the day Lauren told me flat as anything Rosa and I just don't have much in common anymore. Like friendship had an expiration date. I didn't push. I should have, but I didn't. I didn't want to seem like I was clinging to the past. But now, years later, it was Rosa's name that came to mind when I needed someone. Someone who remembered Lauren before she turned into this version of herself. I dialed the number, half expecting it to be disconnected. But it rang, and after a moment, a voice answered. "Mrs. Bennett?" I asked. "This is Helen Bradford. I was wondering if Rosa might have a moment." Her mother didn't hesitate. Of course, she'd be thrilled. She's running her own photography business now. Weddings, mostly. When Rosa came on the line, her voice was bright and full of that same warmth I remembered. "Oh my goodness, Mrs. Bradford. It's been years, call me Helen," I said, smiling for the first time all day. "Actually, I need a favor, and I think you might be perfect for it." We met the next afternoon at a little cafe halfway between our towns. Rosa looked just like I remembered, older, of course, but the same kind eyes, same easy smile. She had her camera bag slung over one shoulder and smelled faintly of vanilla. Over coffee, I told her everything. The invoice, the way I'd been left out my meeting with Christina. She listened without interrupting her face, shifting from surprise to something closer to anger. "You want me to photograph it?" she asked. "Not from inside. From a distance. Just document it. I need to see it for what it really is." She nodded slowly. "You want proof, not just for them, for you." "Exactly." Her voice didn't waver. "I'll do it. I'll be there on the 15th. And I'll make sure you see exactly what 70 grand looks like when it's built on entitlement." And just like that, I didn't feel alone anymore. October 15th arrived under a sky the colour of wet cement. A slow drizzle had started before dawn and showed no sign of letting up. I stood by my kitchen window with a cup of tea in my hands, watching the rain tap against the glass in steady little rhythms. The quiet in my apartment felt different that morning. It wasn't the usual loneliness, it felt intentional, like something I had chosen rather than something I'd fallen into. I'd gotten a text from Rosa just after 6. "Venue looks chaotic. Vendor trucks already pulling out." "Still want me there," I replied with one word. Shh. By mid-morning, my phone started lighting up. Missed calls, voicemails. Some were from Matthew. Others were unknown numbers, probably vendors or guests who'd found my number somewhere in the chain of chaos. I let every single one go to voicemail. I didn't even listen to them. I made another cup of tea. I wiped down the kitchen counters. I refolded a pile of towels I'd already folded the day before. I wasn't nervous. I wasn't angry. I was clear. For the first time in years, I felt sure of what I was doing. Around 11:30, the doorbell rang. I looked through the peephole and saw them, Lauren and Matthew, both soaked from the rain. Lauren had on a long coat over what looked like pajamas, her hair pulled back in a messy knot, her eyes red. Matthew stood behind her arms, crossed jaw tight. I opened the door, but didn't step aside. "Mother?" she started, voice shaky. "We need to talk." I looked at her calmly. "You both look upset. Is something wrong?" Her face crumbled. The florist walked. "The caterers showed up this morning, demanding $12,000 in cash, and when we couldn't pay, they left. The photographer, he says we still owe him $8 grand for the engagement shoot, and now he's refusing to do the ceremony. My wedding is falling apart." Matthew stepped forward, voice harder. "You knew this would happen. You're doing this on purpose." You're punishing her because you didn't get invited." I didn't flinch. I looked at both of them and said evenly, "I'm not punishing anyone. I'm just not paying for something I was never invited to." There was a long silence, the kind that makes people shift in place because it's too uncomfortable to stand still in. The words hit differently now. I could see it in Lauren's face, that flicker of realization that maybe she'd gone too far, that maybe she had finally miscalculated. All those years of tight smiles and half-hearted holiday visits, all the unspoken expectations, all the condescension, it had finally added up to something she couldn't buy her way out of. I didn't yell. I didn't cry. I didn't apologize. I just stood there calm and still, like a person who had finally remembered her worth. Eventually they turned and walked away, their footsteps heavy on the wet stairs. Later that night, Rosa sent me a message. Wedding officially cancelled, guests being informed, caught a full meltdown in the parking lot, got it all. I didn't smile because of the chaos. I smiled because the silence had finally spoken for me, and it said enough. That night, after everything had finally unraveled, I sat at my kitchen table with a bowl of soup in front of me. Potato and leek, the kind I used to make for Jack when the weather turned. The apartment was quiet, but it didn't feel hollow the way it sometimes had after he passed. It felt settled, like something had finally landed after hovering in the air for too long. My phone buzzed once on the table. It was Rosa guests all gone. Whole thing cancelled. Everyone's talking. Some are furious, some are confused. But you made the right call. I stared at the message for a while before setting the phone down and taking a spoonful of soup. It was still warm, comforting, real. I didn't feel triumphant or smug or any of the things people might expect when a moment of vindication like that comes around. I just felt calm. Not because I'd won anything, but because I hadn't let myself be used again. That was the difference. For so long, I'd swallowed every little slight, every cold comment, every passive-aggressive glance across the table. I'd played the role of the quiet mother, the steady widow, the woman who didn't make trouble. And all it ever got me was less space in my own life. But today was different. Today I didn't bend. I didn't try to fix it. I let Lauren's choices speak for themselves. I didn't scream. I didn't beg. I didn't pay. And when they came to my door, soaked and desperate, I didn't flinch. Not because I wanted them to suffer, but because I needed them to see that I wasn't just a checkbook they forgot they had until the last minute. I'm a person. I always have been. I looked around at the small apartment Lauren once called embarrassing. The thrift store furniture, the hand-me-down dishes, the quiet. For the first time in a long time, I didn't feel ashamed of any of it. I felt proud. Because this space, this life was mine, built on my choices, my strength, my silence when it mattered, and my voice when it counted. Sometimes peace doesn't come from fixing what's broken. Sometimes it comes from finally choosing yourself. And tonight, I had. If you've made it this far, thank you for listening to my story. It's not always easy to share something so personal, but I know I'm not the only one who's been made to feel invisible by the people we love most. Maybe you've been the peacekeeper, the one who stayed quiet to keep the family from falling apart. Maybe you've been made to feel like your worth is tied to what you can give, not who you are. If that sounds familiar, I want you to hear this. You are allowed to say no. You are allowed to set boundaries. You are allowed to choose yourself. And if this story moved, you helped you reflect, or made you feel seen, I'd love for you to be part of this space. Go ahead and subscribe, and hit the bell icon so you don't miss what comes next. Share this video with someone who might need it. Leave a comment. I'd love to hear your thoughts or your own experiences. This is more than a story. It's a conversation. and your voice matters here. Thanks for being here. Let's keep telling the truth even when it's uncomfortable, especially then.